Good morning and welcome to Update Dayton. Wonderful program once again today for you. This morning we have a wonderful organization here and I have Jane Novick and she is the CASA Program Manager. Good morning, Jane. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Good morning.
Now, for those of our listeners that do not know what the CASA program is, we're just going to start off at the very basics. Tell us about the program and then we'll get into more of the details.
Certainly. Well, first of all, CASA, that stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. And a CASA is somebody who advocates for what is in the best interests of the children that come to the court. And these are children who have come to the court because there is an allegation of abuse or neglect against their caregiver. And so the courts, of course, can't go out and investigate. So they need somebody else to help them and then to help give them a recommendation what would be best for the children. So we have a caseworker involved, usually from Children's Services, and we have the assistant prosecuting attorney, and then we have the defense attorneys for the parents. But we are considered totally neutral because we are there only advocating for the child. Not that everyone else, of course, is, but we are not aligned with anyone, just the child and nobody else. And so a CASA will go through training and do their investigation. And just in general terms, since you say we're going to go into specifics, their job is to really establish a relationship with the child or children. And from there to meet some other pertinent parties. It could be the school, it could be parents, could be other relatives. Putting it all together, they will write a report and they will help the court determine, should the child go back home? Should the child go to a relative? Does the child need to be in foster care? Things of that nature. And the CASA will be with the child from the very beginning of that first hearing until the child either goes home to family or is adopted.
So a CASA is actually the person that's involved, and they are not associated with the caseworker or Children's Services. This is a totally separate entity, correct?
Absolutely. They are 100% neutral.
And why don't you tell us a little bit more about that, about what exactly, a CASA worker does? I mean, you kind of went into it a little bit, but just a little bit more detail on their services and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, as I said, first they'll go through their 30 hours of training.
Okay.
And then from there, they will, and a lot of times they will be with one of our staff or a peer mentor, more experienced CASA. They will go out and they will visit the child. Now, that might be at the child's home. It might be in the foster home. It might be at Children's Services where visits take place with family and the child. It could be at school. It could be at a myriad of places. And the CASA wants to develop a relationship with the child. Sometimes this is the only healthy adult relationship that child has. It can be monumental. And then the CASA will also try to get to know the family and anyone else who's appropriate. As I said, it could be from school, it could be other family members, it could be family friends, to try and get a sense of what are the dynamics here. And sometimes it's not just talking to them, sometimes it can be body language. An example is, I had a parent who kept saying, I love my child, I was with my child all the time, and now my father won't let me near my child, and we miss each other. We had a meeting at Children's Services, and everyone was there, including the child. The mother wound up coming in last, and the first thing she did was just sit down. Now, anybody who is a parent or has been with children and loves children knows if you haven't seen your child in a while and you see your child, the first thing you're going to do is run to that child. Mm-hmm. You don't care who else is around. You're going to that child. This mother just sat down. That spoke volumes to us.
Right.
So those are all the things that CASA is watching. And because they're developing a relationship, because unfortunately some families have a problem with a caseworker because they see the caseworkers having taken their child. Mm-hmm. Even though the caseworkers do phenomenal work and really care about the child, sometimes that perception wrongfully is there. But the CASA is seen as really trying to help. Again, not always, but mostly. And so they get to know the different parties and they can piece together what's going on here. Like, is a parent only trying to make things better right before the hearing, or are they consistently working? And the CASA might try and help them. So, for example, if there's a child with special needs and they're on an IEP, the CASA can come and help advocate for the child and help that parent or that family member. I had grandparents who had to go to the IEP. They knew nothing about it. It happens to be the area of law that I have great knowledge in. I helped them get a much better IEP. I have some CASAs who were special ed teachers. They are invaluable helping advocate in those situations. So we will advocate. We will help to try and get the right services. If necessary, while we will help family, our job is to advocate for the child, not the parent. But if the parent is trying to do things right and trying to get their act together, then advocating for the parent is in the best interest of the child. So then the CASA will help in that case as well.
I understand. So essentially, the CASA worker basically befriends the child and becomes their voice.
Yes, they're their advocate. And again, their goal is what's in the best interest for the child. Now, if a CASA disagrees with what a child wants, especially an older child, then that child will be given an attorney. Because, again, that child just gets a voice. So if that voice is different from what the CASA wants, then we have to give that child a voice, and it won't be the CASA. It will be the attorney for the child. So really, I would say the CASA is the advocate.
Okay.
And that doesn't necessarily mean the child will agree.
Right. Because necessarily what the child wants isn't always the best thing for the child.
Exactly.
Right. So you say that, a CASA worker, they come in. Why don't we break that down? Who exactly is a CASA worker? How do you become a CASA worker? Is this something that you have to have a background in doing, that kind of thing? Why don't you tell us about that?
Okay, well, first of all, I've had a lot of CASAs tell me, please emphasize this. You do not have to be an attorney at all. Some of my best CASAs were in the business world, were social workers, teachers. I have a retired pediatrician. It does not matter what field you came from. All that matters is that you are willing to commit to doing your best to help these children. And what that means is, as I've mentioned, the 30 hours of training that we go through, and we teach you about trauma in children. We teach you how to write a report. We teach you interviewing skills for the families. We go through the opioid abuse and how that impacts all these different things. Also, you need to understand that family looks different and is not necessarily the way you think of family. And also, it doesn't mean you have to live in a 20,000 square foot house to be a good family. You can live in a small apartment. Sometimes those are the greatest families. So it's to understand those things. Then you will go out. We pair you up with an experienced CASA called a peer mentor. You also have a coordinator. So there is tons of support. Someone will come with you until you feel comfortable making house visits, going to court. We also have you during the training shadow a CASA at several hearings so that you have a more concrete sense of what is going on here. So those things go on. And as I said, it doesn't matter what your background is. And then each year after, you would be expected to do about 12 hours of continuing ed. Now, what that is we're always doing trainings on every subject under the sun at different hours. We're going to start recording them. They can be watched online. You can read a book. We have a great library going. You can see a movie. We can tell you about other trainings, just to keep you up to date on different things.
So is this a hired position?
No, it is a volunteer position.
Volunteer.
You are required to see the child at least once every 30 days. That is the commitment that you have to give. And of course, we want you at the hearings. Now, sometimes things happen, and then the coordinator over that CASA will help and will fill in. But obviously, you need to give some time to this.
So we've talked a little bit about the background, that it really can be anyone from any kind of background that really just wants to help out and volunteer their time. Now, does that mean that someone volunteering needs to be retired or not working, or do you have people that are in the workforce right now?
Oh, it does not matter. If you're in the workforce, and my last class that we graduated, everybody but one was working full time.
Okay.
A lot of companies today really want to encourage community involvement. So if if you're in a situation where they understand every once in a while, and by that, sometimes it could be once a year, maybe twice a year at most, that you'd have to go to a hearing, and that you can do your visits on the weekends. You could do it at night. You can, if you have time during the day, you can do it then. It's really, it does not matter if you're working or retired at all.
Just the expected time commitment is that once every 30 days, visitation with the child, and then, of course, the court hearings, or is there more?
Yeah, the court hearing, and then visiting with or speaking on the phone with other people that you feel are relative.
Okay.
Relevant, to this.
And the training, how long is the training? What can someone expect as they come in as a volunteer?
The training is 30 hours. It's changed a little bit to be a little more trauma focused because of what's going on today. The one we're going to have, our next training, is actually starting Saturday, February 3rd. Okay. That one is going to be 8 sessions on Monday, Wednesday evening, and Saturday in the morning. And it'll end the end of February, and then the swearing in ceremony, which is quite wonderful. It's in Judge Capizzi's courtroom, and Judge Capizzi swears each new CASA in and speaks to them. It's quite beautiful. Will be the very beginning of March. But we will also be doing trainings where it'll be 15 hours in person and 15 hours will be online. Okay. So there'll be both types.
There's a way to work around your schedule, no matter what your schedule happens to be.
Yes.
That's always wonderful to hear. So how do these, I think, a little bit of it's obvious how these CASA workers make a difference in what you've said, but what exactly have you seen? Cases that you've seen, examples where you've seen a CASA worker make a big difference.
I have 3 stories I like to share because I think they really sum up how you can make a difference, but they're different ways. Okay. The first 2 are my cases. One of them was mom and dad lost their 3 children. Well, actually, dad, only one of them was his. The other 2 were moms with a different man. And temporary custody went to maternal grandmother. Maternal grandmother was very angry because her daughter was using drugs and she couldn't accept it. And she blamed this father of the youngest child. And she told me that he would never get his child back. Father, though, it was a wake-up call for him. And he'd call me up and he'd say, Jane, I'm 1 week clean. Jane, I'm 2 weeks clean. And he was really working. And he knew I wasn't ready to say he should get custody. This was at the beginning. But he knew that I supported him and I was glad with what he was doing. So that kept going. And I will tell you, fast forward that 3 years, he has his son back. He is married. He has a phenomenal job. And he kept his word. He makes sure his son sees his 2 half siblings. So that's the fairy tale ending we all want and rarely get. The next one, mom and dad both were heroin users. Their second child was born addicted. That's an automatic removal. That's considered abuse. They went to foster care. Then they found paternal grandmother. They thought she would be a good placement. The children went there until they realized that paternal grandma had a meth lab in her home. Oh.
Wow.
Right. So, that wasn't good. So the children went to foster care. They eventually bounced around till they wound up in a step aunt's house, who I think was marginal. And, sometimes we have to go with the best of bad choices. Right. She got the kids. Mom and dad were incarcerated. I was able to bring the children to visit, which was gut-wrenching. To see their children after about 9 months. I did it to see if it would motivate, if it would do something. They love their children. When they were not high, they loved their children. They cared about them. Mom got out. We did give her children back because we were at a point, if she didn't get them back, the 2 years that you have to kind of work your case were going to end and she would never get custody. It was kind of iffy, but we gave her the chance. She did relapse. The kids went back to the aunt. She did time in prison again, but I will tell you, it's a 1.5 years later. She has been drug-free, and while she won't get custody, she visits with her children. Not the fairy tale ending, but still, it has kept this woman drug-free who had been struggling for years. And she's in her 20s still, and she's still in contact with her children, and her children still have that mother there. So that's still, that's from that CASA work. And I will tell you, 5 years later, she still calls me because I'm the only adult she knows who doesn't use drugs.
Wow.
And I've taken her to support groups. I've taken her to help her when she was buying clothes for her children. I mean, I kind of became like a parent in a sense. The last case is quite interesting. One of our prosecutors told a story. She was a guardian ad litem in Chicago and had a 16-year-old girl who was difficult, never listened to her, was a real pain.
The prosecutors,
the child that she was a guardian ad litem for.
Okay.
The prosecutor is now in Dayton, and she said 10 years later, this now young woman found the prosecutor and said, remember me, the one who was a pain, who never listened to you? Well, I did listen to you, and I turned my life around because of you.
Wow.
And so that story illustrates that you may not be fortunate enough to see the benefits of what you've done, but you're not doing it for that reason. And if you're doing it to get the pat on the head, it's the wrong thing. But that you should know that you could be making a difference even if you don't get to see that. But you never know what seed you have planted and when it will be triggered and how you can change the life of a child.
Wow. I have chills right now. I'm almost speechless, which doesn't happen to me, honestly, that often. You know, right now, the opioid crisis here in Dayton is, out of control. Obviously, I think we're number one in the country, or at least right there, this whole area. What are you seeing right now that you can tell us about, and how CASA is affecting that situation?
Well, it's affecting us in that we are in desperate need for more volunteers. We cannot keep up. We have so many cases coming in. The increase, in fact, I just did the numbers. In some cases, it's a 30% increase from last year of kids coming in abused and neglected because parents are dead. Parents have, we read it in the paper, slumped over in their car. They've been, we've had kids who've been pimped out because that's how they get money for drugs. On and on, the horrible stories. So it is wreaking havoc on us and on many courts that we desperately, desperately need more CASAs to help these children. These children are such innocent victims, the trauma they're going through. So if we can have a CASA who, as I say, from the moment they're appointed, they stay until that child is reunified or a relative gets legal custody or they're adopted. They're there the whole time to make sure if something goes wrong, that CASA is there to advocate. Because sometimes we put them in a home and then we realize, now there's a problem, like with that grandmother who then they found out with the meth lab, or they're in a foster home and we need to watch if there's a problem. They're there the whole time or until they're adopted, and that child has consistency. That's the one thing that can help. Given all the trauma these children are going through, they need somebody that they can trust, somebody who's good, who they know is always there for them. And it is a great way we can make a difference in the life of these children. And instead of just complaining, about what can be done, why is nothing happening, if we all were willing to give that time to help these children, we could we might not be able to help the parents who are addicted, but we can hopefully prevent the next generation from really having horrible problems as a result of this trauma they are experiencing.
Wow. I wish people, the ones that are listening right now, could see you, because you're so passionate. You're so passionate about this. I do have to ask, just in listening to this whole thing, well, number one, is there a cutoff of age for the children, and at what point a CASA worker stops working with them?
Well, first of all, I should tell you, they need to be 21. The volunteers need to be 21. But as far as the children pretty much emancipate at age 18. We do have some that can stay until 21, but pretty much is age 18 when they age out of the system.
So with that being said, is there any kind of risk involved with being a CASA worker? I mean, as far as the kids and their age, obviously the families, the parents, I mean, just like you said with the caseworkers earlier, a lot of times you look at a caseworker like they're taking their kids away. How does that relate to you?
I think the biggest risk is that we want to take these children home with us. That's the biggest risk. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's that it is so hard to leave that child sometime and say, if I could take them into my home. But on the other side that you're, I believe, more alluding to, everyone has a different threshold of safety. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, we have never had a problem. Generally, when you go into neighborhoods that people worry about, I have found they actually are great to us because they know we're here to help. Mm-hmm. But that being said, we want people comfortable. Mm-hmm. These are our CASAs, they're our volunteers. Someone will go with them anytime someone feels uncomfortable. Or, I mean, sometimes you have people who have mental health problems, and even though they probably wouldn't do anything, you still want someone. So someone goes. And I've done that. Mm-hmm. I've gone. I mean, I have a father who's kind of upset with me. He's blaming me. And he's got a lot of mental health problems. So I go with a caseworker. Mm-hmm. I mean, nothing happens, but at least there's two of us there. So there really has not been a problem. As I said, we are usually perceived in a positive way, but if not like this father that I have, we go with somebody.
Well, that's good to know. Mm-hmm. So how does someone become a volunteer? Where do they go to make that happen?
Well, I'm happy to say that we are social media people now. We are the first ones in the court to have Facebook. So we're at Montgomery County Juvenile Court CASA Program. Our website is www.CASAM like Mary, C like County.com. Or you can call at 937-225-5491. And at Facebook, not at Facebook, but in our webpage, we have the application online. Okay. You can also call if you would like one sent to you. And if you want to email, you can email me at jnovick, N-O-V as in Victor, I-C-K, at mcjcohio.org. Any of those ways, and we would be more than happy to answer your questions and certainly send you an application.
Well, fantastic. Give us that web address one more time.
www.CASA, CASAMC.com.
CASAMC.com.
Correct.
CASA, CASAMC.com. All right. Well, this is a wonderful opportunity if you're looking for a way to give back and help out this community, which is in desperate need, honestly, of help. It'd be a fantastic way to do it. Thank you so much, Jane, for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share our message.